All right, so today we're going to take a deep dive into the Camino del Norte. And, I've been poring over the lens of Jen blog and Stingy Nomad's website.
Mm.
And wow, the pictures of the coast, the towns, they just look incredible. Have you seen
Oh,
those?
yeah. The scenery is definitely one of the big draws for the Camino del Norte.
Yeah, but before I set off on any big adventure,
Yeah.
I want to make sure I have all the practical stuff figured out too. So, what are the pros and cons? The best time to go? How does it stack up against other Camino routes like the Francis? And of course, the all-important question, where to stay along the way.
Well, it sounds like you've got some great questions, and I'm happy to share what I know. You're definitely thinking about all the right things. Planning is key, especially for a route like the Camino del Norte.
Okay, so maybe we could just start with like a basic overview. What exactly is the Camino del Norte? Like for someone who's never even heard of it before.
Okay, good place to start. So the Camino del Norte is it's a pilgrimage route, and it runs along the northern coast of Spain. It's about 537 miles, and it starts in a town called Irun and ends all the way in Santiago de Compostela.
Oh, wow, okay. And you said it follows the coast, so that explains all those amazing ocean views I saw in the pictures.
Exactly, yeah. Unlike the Camino Francis, which is the most popular route and kind of cuts inland, the Del Norte sticks to the coast the whole way. So yeah, you get those dramatic cliffs and beaches and all that.
Okay, so scenic beauty check.
Yeah.
But I also noticed that Stingy Nomads mentioned some pretty tough terrain, especially in the Basque Country.
Mm.
What's the deal with that? Is it really that challenging?
Yeah, the terrain can be a bit more challenging on the Del Norte, especially in those first few stages through the Basque Country. You're going to encounter some pretty steep ascents and descents.
Oh, so it's not exactly a walk in the park.
Not exactly, but the payoff is those incredible views.
Yeah.
And the sense of accomplishment you feel after conquering those hills, that's pretty special.
Okay, I can see how that would appeal to some people. So it's a bit of a trade-off then. Stunning scenery for a bit more physical exertion. Now, in terms of other Camino routes, like you mentioned, the Francis is the most popular. How do they compare in terms of like crowds?
Well, that's one of the big advantages of the Camino del Norte. It's a lot less crowded than the Francis. You'll still encounter fellow pilgrims, of course, but you're not going to be walking shoulder to shoulder with hundreds of people every day.
Oh, wow. Okay, that sounds pretty appealing. I like my peace and quiet.
Yeah, if you're looking for a more solitary experience, the Del Norte is definitely a good option.
Now, I did notice that Jen's blog mentioned something about another Camino route, the Camino Primitivo, I think she called it.
Oh, yeah, the Primitivo. Yeah, that's an older route, and it actually branches off inland and then rejoins the Camino del Norte later on.
Oh, interesting. So is that like another alternative to the Francis?
It is, yeah. It's known for its historical significance, and it's actually even more rugged than the Del Norte. So if you're up for a real challenge.
Maybe not for me then. So going back to the Del Norte and the Francis, like, why would someone choose the Del Norte over the Francis, besides the crowds? What makes it a better choice?
Well, like we said, the Del Norte is definitely less crowded, but it also offers something really unique. The coastal scenery. You're walking along the Atlantic the whole way, and the cultural experience is really diverse too. You're passing through several different regions of Spain, each with their own traditions and cuisine.
Okay, yeah, that cultural aspect sounds really cool. So it's like a multi-sensory experience, not just a walk.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the advantages, but what about the disadvantages?
Hmm.
Like, besides those Basque Hills, are there any other downsides to the Camino del Norte?
Well, one thing to consider is the infrastructure. It's not quite as developed as the Camino Francis.
What do you mean by that?
Like, there are fewer albergues, which are the pilgrim hostels, and fewer amenities in general.
Oh, so that means it could be more expensive, right? And maybe a bit more challenging to plan.
Yeah, that's right. You might have to do a bit more research and book your accommodation in advance, especially if you're walking during peak season. And there might be some longer stretches between towns where you won't find as many places to eat or resupply.
Okay, so a bit more planning involved, but maybe that's part of the adventure too.
Yeah, it definitely adds an element of challenge and spontaneity to the journey.
And speaking of planning, what about the best time to walk the Camino del Norte? I know Stingy Nomads mentioned June being peak season, but is that really the ideal time to go?
June can be a beautiful time to walk, especially along the coast, but it's also the busiest and most expensive time.
Yeah, I can imagine those coastal towns getting pretty crowded in the summer. And Jen's blog mentioned some pretty chilly and rainy days, even in the summer. So it seems like packing layers is key no matter when you go.
Yeah, the weather on the Camino del Norte can be a bit unpredictable, so it's always best to be prepared for all kinds of conditions.
Okay, good gear and flexible packing, got it. So maybe spring or fall would be better options then.
Yeah, spring, April, May, and fall, September, October, are usually a good balance of pleasant weather and fewer crowds.
All right, makes sense. So we've got a good overview of the route itself, the pros and cons, when to go. But I'm also really curious to dive into the actual journey, like break down those stages and terrain. Can we start with that dramatic beginning in Iran? Like, what should someone expect on those first few days?
Okay, yeah, let's take a virtual walk, shall we? Imagine yourself starting in Irun, where the Pyrenees Mountains meet the Atlantic. You're right there in Irun, and the Pyrenees are like looming in the distance. It's pretty dramatic. And that first stage is no joke about 15 miles.
15 miles, that doesn't sound too bad.
Well, it's not the distance, it's the elevation. Remember those Basque Hills we talked about?
Oh, right. Stingy nomads made them sound pretty intense.
They are pretty intense, yeah. You're gaining over 2,000 feet of elevation on that first day, so yeah, be prepared to feel it in your legs.
Wow, okay. So breathtaking scenery, but maybe bring some extra strength too. What happens after that climb, though?
Well, it does level out a bit as you head towards San Sebastian. You'll be following a mix of like coastal paths and some quiet country roads.
Sounds nice.
It is nice. You'll pass through these really charming villages like Orio and Zaratz. They're known for their beaches and their seafood restaurants.
Oh, perfect places to refuel and enjoy the views. And then you said San Sebastian, right? What are some of the must-do things there?
Well, you have to try the pinzos, of course.
Right, those little snacks. Jen raved about them in her blog.
Yeah, they're like these little bite-sized snacks often served on skewers or bread.
Yeah.
And they come in all these different flavors and ingredients. It's an experience.
Okay, definitely putting that on my list. What else is there to see in San Sebastian?
To definitely check out the Old Town. It's got those narrow cobblestone streets and a really lively atmosphere.
Yeah.
And then there's La Concha Beach, which is considered one of the most beautiful urban beaches in Europe.
Wow, okay. All right, so we've tackled the Basque Hills, enjoyed the food and sights of San Sebastian. What happens next on the Camino del Norte?
So from there, the journey continues westward along the coast. You'll see more rolling hills and more stunning coastal views. You'll pass through towns like Deba and Marquina Camina.
Are they as charming as the other towns you mentioned?
Oh yeah, each one has its own unique charm.
What about the terrain? Is it still as challenging as those first few days?
It's definitely less strenuous than those first few days out of Yvern, but there are still some hills.
Okay, good to know.
The good news is that the paths are generally well maintained, and the scenery is just absolutely breathtaking.
So we can enjoy the views without feeling like we're climbing a mountain every day. I like that.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the Basque Country, and I know it has a very distinct culture. Do you get to experience that along this part of the Camino?
Oh yeah, definitely. This part of the Basque Country is really rich in culture and history, and you'll notice that the Basque language, Euskara, it's much more prominent here.
Oh, that's right. I remember reading about that. It's like a completely different language family, right?
Yeah, it's completely unrelated to any other Indo-European language. It's really fascinating to see it still thriving, you know?
So is there like a chance to pick up a few phrases along the way?
Oh, absolutely. Many locals, especially in the smaller villages, they speak Euskara. And you'll often see signs and menus in both Basque and Spanish.
Cool. So it's like a little language immersion experience too.
It is, yeah. It's a great opportunity to, try out a few basic phrases and just connect with the local culture.
Okay, I'll definitely try to learn a few. What about accommodation along this stretch? Are there any albergues that stand out in your mind?
Well, there's the Hostel Texalupa Guetaria in Guetaria. It's this great little family-run albergue with a really warm and welcoming atmosphere.
Sounds nice.
It is nice. And it's right on the coast, so you can fall asleep to the sound of the waves.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. And for those of us who aren't into the whole dorm-style accommodation, are there any good pensions or guest houses in the area?
Yeah, for sure. There's the Pension Guetariano, also in Guetaria. It's a charming guest house known for its comfortable rooms, and their breakfast is fantastic.
Okay, good to know we've got options.
Yeah.
So it sounds like this part of the Camino del Norte offers a fantastic mix of scenery, culture, and some cozy places to stay. What comes next as we continue our journey westward?
Well, from the Basque Country, you cross the border into Cantabria, and the landscape changes again. The coastline becomes even more dramatic, like towering cliffs and hidden coves, and the rolling hills are dotted with these traditional villages and farmhouses.
This is making me want to book a flight right now. I think Stingy Nomads mentioned some really charming fishing villages too, right?
They did, yeah. There's Castor Rodialis. It's one you definitely won't want to miss.
What's so special about it?
Well, it's a historic fishing village with a beautiful harbor and a medieval old town, and of course some fantastic seafood restaurants.
Okay, sensing a theme here.
Yeah.
Stunning scenery and delicious food. So what about the terrain in Cantabria? Does it get any easier?
There are definitely still some hills, but overall it's a bit more forgiving than the Basque Country. You'll be walking along a mix of coastal paths, some quiet country roads, and even some forest trails.
Oh, so there's some variety.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I know Spain has a rich history, and I'm always fascinated by architecture. Are there any buildings or monuments along this part of the Camino del Norte that are worth checking out?
Oh, for sure. Cantabria is known for its Romanesque architecture, and you'll see some beautiful examples of that along the Camino del Norte.
Like what?
Well, there's the Collegiate Church of Santillana del Mar that we mentioned earlier. It's definitely worth a detour.
Okay, and what makes Romanesque architecture unique?
Well, it's all about those rounded arches and thick walls. You know, it gives you this sense of solidity and grandeur.
I can picture it.
It's a style that I think really reflects the spirit of the Camino in a way, you know?
How so?
It's a journey that's challenging but also awe-inspiring, just like those buildings.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so we've explored the Basque Country and Cantabria. That means we're entering the third region of our Camino del Norte journey, Asturias, right? What can you tell us about this region?
So Asturias is where the Camino del Norte really gets mountainous. You'll be walking through the foothills of the Picos de Europa.
Picos de Europa. That sounds intense.
It is pretty intense. It's a stunning mountain range with these towering peaks and lush valleys.
Wow. Okay, so amazing views, but potentially challenging hiking as well.
Yeah, there are some challenging ascents and descents, but I promise the rewards are worth it.
Like what? What kind of rewards are we talking about?
Well, imagine walking through these ancient forests, crossing rushing rivers and being surrounded by these incredible mountain views.
Okay, yeah, that sounds pretty incredible.
Mm.
What about towns and cities in Asturias? Are there any that stand out?
For sure. Yens is a must-see. It's a really charming coastal town with a beautiful old town and a bustling harbor.
And more good food, I'm guessing.
Oh, definitely. And be sure to stop at a traditional cider house and sample the local brew.
Oh, right. Asturian cider. I've heard it's quite different from what we usually think of as cider. What makes it so special?
Well, it's natural cider. They make it from locally grown apples, and they pour it in this unique way from a height to aerate it.
Oh, wow. I've seen videos of that.
It's quite an experience.
I bet. Okay, so we've tackled those Asturian mountains. We've had some cider.
Mm.
Where does the Camino del Norte take us next?
From Asturias, you continue westward following the coastline, and you'll enter Galicia. That's the final region of the journey.
And Galicia is where Santiago de Compostela is, right?
Yeah.
But what can we expect in these final stages of the Camino del Norte? Like, what's it like?
Well, the terrain in Galicia is a mix of rolling hills and forests and coastal paths, and it kind of gradually descends towards Santiago de Compostela.
Okay.
But you'll notice a change in the atmosphere as you get closer to your final destination. There's this palpable sense of anticipation and excitement.
I can imagine, yeah. What are some of the must-see towns or villages along this final stretch?
Well, there's Ribadeo. It's right on the border of Asturias and Galicia. It's known for its beautiful estuary, and the seafood is amazing. And then further along the coast, you'll pass through Mondoñedo.
What's that like?
It's a historic town with a beautiful cathedral and a medieval old town.
Wow, so it sounds like this last part of the journey is really about soaking it all in, savoring the scenery and the culture before reaching the final destination.
Yeah, exactly.
It must feel almost bittersweet in a way.
It can be, yeah.
What about those final steps into Santiago de Compostela? Like, what can someone expect as they approach the end of their Camino del Norte journey?
It's a moment you'll never forget. After weeks of walking, you finally catch a glimpse of the cathedral spires in the distance, and it's just incredible. And then you walk through those ancient streets, and you're surrounded by other pilgrims, all sharing in that joy and accomplishment of reaching their destination.
Getting goosebumps just thinking about it.
It's really something special.
Okay, so before we get all teary-eyed here, let's talk about some of the practicalities of walking the Camino del Norte. We talked a bit about gear and packing, but what about things like navigation? Are there clear markings along the route so you don't get lost?
Yeah, the Camino del Norte is very well marked. You'll see those yellow arrows and scallop shells guiding you along the way. And there are signs indicating distances and directions to the nearby towns and villages.
So you're saying it's pretty hard to get lost.
It's possible to take a wrong turn here or there, but generally the markings are really clear and easy to follow.
Okay, that's good to know. And what about maps? Are they necessary?
It's always a good idea to have a map as a backup, just in case, especially if you're thinking of exploring some of the side trails or venturing off the main route.
Okay, good point. Are there any good Camino del Norte maps you recommend?
Yeah. John Brayley's A Pilgrim's Guide to the Camino del Norte is a classic. It's really detailed, and it's got maps, stage descriptions, and tons of practical information.
Perfect. I'll check that out. Now, I'm all about using technology to make my life easier. Can you use apps or GPS devices for navigation on the Camino?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There are a bunch of apps designed specifically for Camino navigation, like Wise Pilgrim and Camino Ninja.
What do those do?
They've got offline maps, GPS tracking, and even info about albergues some services along the way.
Wow. Technology has definitely made it easier to navigate these ancient routes. But I have to admit, there's still something kind of magical about following those traditional yellow arrows and scallop shells.
I agree. There's definitely a sense of history and tradition.
Yeah.
It's like a reminder that you're part of something bigger than yourself.
Yeah. Okay, speaking of history and tradition,
Uh-huh.
I'm curious about the spiritual side of the Camino del Norte. I know it's not explicitly a religious pilgrimage, but Jen mentioned in her blog that she experienced these moments of, profound introspection and connection along the way. What are your thoughts on the spiritual aspect of the Camino?
Yeah, I think that's something a lot of people experience on the Camino del Norte. All the Camino routes, really. It's like it strips away the non-essential, and you're really brought face to face with yourself.
So it's more about the inner journey than the outer journey.
In a way, yeah. The rhythm of walking, the connection with nature, the simplicity of life on the trail, it all creates a space for reflection and introspection.
So it's like a chance to disconnect from all the noise and distractions of everyday life
Hmm.
and reconnect with something deeper.
Exactly. And for many people, that process of self-discovery is deeply spiritual, whether they're religious or not.
I could see how the Camino del Norte would appeal to all kinds of people. Those seeking a spiritual experience, those looking for a physical challenge, or maybe even those who just need a break from their everyday life.
Yeah, it's a journey that offers something for everyone.
Okay, so we've talked about the physical challenges, the stunning scenery, the cultural experiences, but what about the emotional side of things? Like, what kind of mindset should someone have going into a journey like this?
That's a really good question. I think it's important to go in with an open mind and be prepared for the unexpected. The Camino del Norte will test you, both physically and mentally.
In what ways?
Well, there will be days when you're tired, sore, and maybe even questioning why you're doing this.
Hmm.
But it's in those moments of challenge that you really discover your inner strength and resilience.
So it sounds like you need to be prepared for an emotional roller coaster as much as a physical one.
Yeah, you could say that.
Any tips for staying motivated and positive during those inevitable tough moments?
I think one thing that helps is to break the journey down into smaller chunks,
Yeah. Like, what do you mean?
Well, instead of focusing on the entire 537 miles, just focus on reaching the next town, the next albergue, the next viewpoint, whatever feels manageable.
Oh, that makes sense.
And, celebrate those small victories along the way. Give yourself a little pat on the back.
Right. Don't forget to enjoy the journey.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
Yeah.
That's one of the great things about the Camino. There's this amazing sense of community.
Yeah, Jen talked about that a lot in her blog, like how she met some really incredible people along the way.
Oh, yeah. The Camino del Norte really has a way of bringing people together. You're sharing meals, stories, you're laughing together, you're complaining about blisters together.
It sounds like you make some pretty strong bonds.
You do. And those connections often extend far beyond the Camino itself.
It's not just about the physical journey. It's about the people you meet along the way.
It really is. It's about opening yourself up to new people, new cultures, new ways of seeing the world. You might even make some lifelong friends.
That's amazing. It's like the Camino del Norte is a microcosm of life itself, all the challenges, the triumphs, the connections.
I think you're right. It's a journey that teaches you a lot about yourself and about the world.
Okay, well, I have to say I'm feeling super inspired after hearing all of this. But, if someone's listening and thinking, I want to do this, I want to walk the Camino del Norte.
Yeah.
What advice would you give them? Like, where should they even start?
Well, first of all, I'd say listen to that little voice inside you. If the Camino is calling to you, then go for it.
Yeah. Don't let fear hold you back.
Exactly. And then just start doing your research. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, but there's always more to learn.
Where should people look for information?
Read some blogs, guidebooks, talk to people who've walked the Camino, get as much info as you can, and most importantly, start walking.
Yeah, even if it's just a few miles a day, get those legs ready.
Yeah, exactly. Start preparing your body and your mind for the journey ahead.
And remember, it's not about speed or being perfect. It's about embracing the experience every step of the way.
Well said. The Camino del Norte is waiting for you. Take that leap and discover the magic for yourself.
This has been an absolutely incredible deep dive into the Camino del Norte. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your expertise and your passion.
It was my pleasure. Buen Camino.
And to our listeners, buen camino. May your journey be filled with those breathtaking views, unexpected encounters, and those moments of profound transformation that we talked about.